there's a part of an AI system that we call the gradient. If you visualize all these weights of these models, they're all a number on a graph somewhere. And they make mountains in front of you when you kind of plot it in 3D space. And when you prompt it, the landscape shifts. So if you don't prompt it with something that increases your likelihood of getting the kind of answer that you want, you're just going to get a generic answer. It's going to go down into the valley that it always goes down when it has a bland input. But if you prompt it with something deep and detailed and highly contextual, it changes the landscape. So you go down different valleys and different peaks to get to a different destination on that map of weights and biases.
Welcome to Zero Shot, the AI podcast without all the hype, and we're built for one reason, to be the source you actually trust when it comes to AI and business. And every week we are bringing you the conversations, the breakdowns, and the honest analysis that helps you make better decisions in a space that is moving incredibly fast. I'm Llew Jury, the Managing Director of Advancer AI, where we build quality AI and automations for Australian businesses. And as always, I'm joined by the one and only James Gauci. G'day, James.
G'day, Llew, and hi to everybody around the place, and a big welcome to anybody joining for the first time as well. I'm James Gauci, the CEO of Cadent. We build and govern AI in high-risk settings, and we're a couple of people who've been around the traps for a little while, and we've been living in this AI thing every day for the last few years. We also know that the noise around it is super overwhelming, but we are all in it together, and that's why we built Zero Shot. It's for everyone out there looking for a steady hand through the AI revolution, isn't it?
It is, James, absolutely. And last week we sorted what is worth handing AI to, and we went through the 5 triggers, and a few of you will remember I jumped ahead and promised a number of things that, during that episode.
Are you writing checks again, Llew?
I was writing checks. I was nearly on the soapbox, but I was nearly there. But basically, because the number one thing that people ask us is, why does my AI give me a boring, generic, average answer? And I started to talk about this thing called prompt engineering. So episode 26, this is all about prompt engineering, prompting for agents, and things like that. And James, it's almost never about the model, right? The models are quite astonishing. And the reason you get average output is the brief that we give it. And today is about how to brief an AI properly. So you get the results everybody else is missing.
Yeah, we're going to go through why your prompts have a tendency to underperform from a practical and a technical perspective, and some of the fixes that you can implement to resolve that. Second, we're going to go through the anatomy of a good brief and a good prompt. Some of this will be rehashing some older concepts for some of the more advanced AI users out there, but we'll try and dig into why these things work as much as what is actually working. And third, how to stop briefing from scratch every time. If I had $1 for every time I put the same prompt into a conversational AI interface, I'd be able to buy us both lunch, Llew. So it's probably time to get into prompt engineering, and also prompt engineering inside AI agents, which is that final piece that we'll be talking about today.
Awesome. And a quick mention to our awesome sponsors, promptcowboy.ai. So honestly, there has never been a more fitting episode for these guys, for Matt and Henry, and everything today is about briefing AI well, and that's what they do really well at Prompt Cowboy. It's actually built for you and your teams to actually construct a precise, structured prompt before you put it to work, and use their agent setting in the chat window as a bit of a tip to help you build out any of the agents that you might want to build at the end of this awesome episode 26. So if today lands for you, that's where to start. So trot on over to promptcowboy.ai. James,
yeah. I've got some news of the week.
News.
So
love news.
Yeah, love news. We've got an announcement coming from the Prime Minister within the next 24 hours.
Big.
On the topic of AI and copyright.
Wow.
Many of us in business will be aware that the tech lobby has been pushing really hard for relaxation of Australia's copyright laws in order for more AI training to happen in this country. On the other side of the ledger, we've got artists and creatives and people who are authoring lots of original work, wondering how they're going to get a fair share of the pie. And this is something that's been wrestled with for quite some time in the Australian economy, and it'll be really interesting to see how the government has played its hand to get leverage with the international AI companies in order to extract more capital from them for development of capabilities internally in Australia. So yeah, really, really interesting times in the Australian economy for AI and our national position on it, Lou.
And I've seen a lot of things, James, around Anthropic are in town a lot, and Jim Chalmers, the Treasurer of Australia, is talking to them, and there's a few things going on in the news and all of that. So it's really right up there, obviously at the highest levels of government now, isn't it? And,
Mm,
you probably would have heard it when you're at the AI safety conference last week as well. There would have been that dialogue around all of this. So, yeah, super interesting.
yeah. That's
And
that's right. It's a really interesting time, especially given the geopolitical instability in the United States and around the United States. Companies like Anthropic and OpenAI and the big AI shops are looking at Australia as potentially another, perhaps more stable at the government level, alternative and partner, and a good spot to kind of leapfrog into the Asian market as well. So yeah, watch this space.
yeah, absolutely. And watching the space, my tool of the week, I'm actually, your news of the week is macro and so essential, listening and viewing. Mine is just a bit micro, but I think for the users out there that, are all over Claude and Copilot, this one's for the ChatGPT users, James. This is
Mm,
about ChatGPT work, which is kind of like everything's called work now, isn't it? Apart from Perplexity, they've got computer, but we've got, Claude co-work, and we've got co-work coming for Copilot, and we've got ChatGPT work. Everything's about work, right? So I've
mm,
been trying out ChatGPT work using Sol, and
mhm,
Sol is their OpenAI's flagship model, in the power mode. You put it in the power mode and away you go. And it was featured in their recent release last week from OpenAI. And it's basically on, turn it on the higher settings. It's a bit like Fable 5, James. And away you go. But I think I get the feeling it's more than just a normal OpenAI upgrade. We're not 5.5 and going 5.6 and all this. It's actually a bit of a generational shift. And I think they're
mm,
trying to play catch up to, of course, the Fable world, the co-work world that, through the enterprise space that Anthropic have got a real jump using Claude into most of the markets. And
mm,
I've been trying it out, preparing a weekly leadership brief to my team and
mhm.
for my team. It reviews all my connected sources. I didn't realize how many connected sources I'd already hooked up years ago inside OpenAI, and who knows how long they've been connected. But the Slacks and the Google Drives and the all of the bits of kit. It's actually built a really clever prompt. What I really like about this is there's a bit of awesome prompting that's gone on to this actual bit of kit. And I didn't actually need to change the brief that it actually said, Lou, I think you would like this. So,
Mm,
one to watch, of course, review the guardrails and edge cases, review the content that comes out of this, review the sources that it's sort of calling up, the deliverables, all of that sort of thing. But the verdict is check out, if you've got a ChatGPT paid license, you now have ChatGPT work, and check out Sol and maybe do
mm.
your own comparison against
Yeah,
Fable 5.
the benchmarks are coming up quite nicely for
They are.
Sol. They're right up there. But it is interesting that the days of OpenAI leading every benchmark are certainly behind it.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that there isn't still value there, and OpenAI still tends to perform really well in particular areas of work, and especially in coding harnesses. One of the things that I wanted to pick up on there was the fact that you've essentially got an AI time capsule on your hands, Lou. You've got
Mm.
this crystallized set of skills and connectors and things that you set up ages ago. And
Yeah.
you're probably one of the few people in the AI industry who can do a bit of an A/B test at the moment and see whether like how much the model and
Yes.
changing the model actually changes the quality of your experience with those older skills and things that you'd used in the past. What's that been like?
Yeah, so far so good, and I think they've preempted that with a lot of users that basically, they're preempting skills again,
Mm,
OpenAI, I think, because they're trying to again do it what Claude does natively. If you don't do your /skill inside Claude, it will pick it up anyway because it picks up the gist of what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to ask it and prompt it. So yeah, it's I'll keep reporting back on this because
mm.
it's definitely one to watch. And there was also a quick update I just quickly saw, James, about Grok 4.5
Oh, yep.
is getting some great numbers inside Cursor. And of
Mhm.
course, we remember that Cursor's that large acquisition under I think cash and also SpaceX shares and things like that. They've actually sort of said that the Grok, you can now use something that is trained on SpaceX. So not just
Mm,
XAI and, the million GPUs that Elon a couple of years ago used to actually train up, and Twitter, of course, don't forget Twitter. It's actually, hey, you can actually use something that now is going to be used for space, and that's a real, hook, I suppose, to the coding and development community.
That's pretty cool, isn't it? Maybe we'll be pivoting into space, like space engineering. What do you even call that? I don't know.
Yeah. How cool.
A quick one before we start.
Yeah.
We're building next season of Zero Shot at the moment, and we've got a bit of a request for everybody. We want to know what you want to hear, and what we would love for you to do is just grab your phone or open up a browser tab, go to our website, or there's a 1-minute survey in the episode description that is hosted on our website. And what we want you to do is tell us what you want us to dig into, a bit about the seat that you're sitting in, and we'll make the show for you. Because something that I'm learning increasingly over the last couple of years is that the algorithm is getting much, much better at working out what each individual wants and needs. It's funny how there's a correlation with the capability of AI systems there. But yeah, we want to make it for you. You're already with us. You're already listening. So please take a minute out of your day, follow the link in the description to our 1-minute survey, and tell us what are the things that you'd like us to cover in the next season of Zero Shot.
Yeah, it's so important. We love to hear from you. So that'd be awesome. Yeah, unreal. So let's get into it, James. Let's get into episode 26. And this is a cracker. And it's a lot of different layers today. We're going to start with a fairly elementary and just talk a theoretical about, why prompts underperform. And then we're going to dive into some actual practical, the 4 pillars of the perfect prompt. There's a good bit of alliteration for everybody out there. And then we're going to dive into your world, James, of really how an agent harness and what inside that agent harness you actually build to get the most out of it. So, yeah, let's rip into it. So, James, why do prompts underperform? Why are most people under-briefing still? Is it because of it's still a nascent technology? People are still sort of coming on board into the sort of the paid versions, or is it, because Fable's pretty awesome, right? So the raw capability is really the limit. But is it prompting? What is it? Where do we start, James? How do we unpack this?
Yeah, I think it's what we're experiencing now is, now that the shine has worn off somewhat, the novelty of being able to dive into a browser or dive into a kind of an application on your desktop and ask anything and get high quality answers, which is incredible. And I don't know how we quite lived without it 4 years ago these days, which is very strange. But the upshot is that we can now get access to a lot of information really quickly. And now the differentiator is not whether or not you have access to AI in the first place. It's how can you extract the most value out of its use. And so we've reached the kind of latent limits of what lives in these systems just inherently, and their ability to get stuff out of us. Now the tables have turned somewhat. It's like, okay, so what skills do I need to develop as an individual in order to extract the most value out of that system? And the thing that I think not a lot of people realize is you can use the system to help you with that process. And so when we give a poor prompt, a bland prompt, like, hi, how are you? What does it give us back? I'm great. Let me know if you need any help on something. Like, there's no intent there. There's no content. There's nothing for the model to sink its teeth into, and it's trained and prompted behind the scenes, and we'll get into that, to just be like, you're a helpful digital assistant and you can do this stuff. And so help the person that is in front of you and give good information and don't lie about things and blah, blah, blah. But there's a part of an AI system that we call the gradient. So if you visualize all these weights of these models, they're all a number on a graph somewhere. And they make mountains in front of you when you kind of plot it in 3D space. And when you prompt it, the landscape shifts. So if you don't prompt it with something that increases your likelihood of getting the kind of answer that you want, you're just going to get a generic answer. It's going to go down into the valley that it always goes down when it has a bland input. But if you prompt it with something deep and detailed and highly contextual, it changes the landscape. So you go down different valleys and different peaks to get to a different destination on that map of weights and biases. And I hope that this is coming across in audio form, because I'm using a very, very, I would say, a complex metaphor to describe this. But that is me attempting to articulate what all of these numbers and statistics behind the scenes look like when you actually plot them out on a graph. And it's the difference between the same old landscape every time and a brand new landscape every time you give a prompt, if it's a high quality prompt.
I just love it. I love the expressive jazz hands. I've been doing jazz hands on this pod for now 26 episodes, and you're now doing expressive jazz hands as well.
That's a prompt for everybody to get onto YouTube and watch the video if you'd like to see me doing interpretive dance.
It's awesome. Interpretive AI dance. I like that. And mime. Like, this is cool. Yenny is now just laughing and going, I can't believe what you guys are talking about. But anyway.
Well, I'll get us back on track, Llew. You train teams on this stuff all the time, and getting out of this theoretical weights and biases, mountains and valleys kind of land. What's the typical first prompt look like for a person? And like what's missing most of the time when you're training somebody who might be even opening up OpenAI or Anthropic or Copilot for the first time, and they put something in and they wonder why what they get out isn't quite up to scratch?
Yeah, the first time that people put in prompts are often they're trying to replicate what they've been doing for 26 years, if they're old enough to sort of go that long, on Google. And Google pretty much has sort of conditioned us to ask it, do questions and answers, and ask it in a way that we get instantaneous response for mainly things like shopping, finding our way, travel, any discounts, the whole thing, right? Because the internet was really brought up on the DIY, the internet is cheaper, and you're going to do a Q&A to get that out. So often there's a 3-stage process that we do in prompt engineering. And the first one is, hey, just open up your GPT, doesn't matter what it is, paid or unpaid, pop in your prompt and tell me the result. And I always pick on a couple of poor unsuspecting victims and say, right, can you tell us what your prompt was? And then can you give us the gist of what was the result? And we do that to get a baseline setting. We do that to sort of basically show that if you don't have certain elements to what is, true prompt engineering, you're not actually going to get the power from it. And often it is a question and answer. It's like, hey, how you going? Or it's a personal thing, which a lot of people are using, of course, these GPTs for, personal life coaching in a way. So there's often a lot of that, because I deliberately don't say, James, do it for the business context. I actually just sort of see whether there's a split between, B2C and B2B and also personal and things like that. So often it's about the framing of it, and I'm actually tracking to see whether the conditioning is moving from the Google prompting, which is a sort of Roses, Sydney, Valentine's Day type question and answer, through to actually doing everything else, which we're going to talk about in the next segment. So yeah, that's what I typically see, and it's often the crux of what is missing. You've already mentioned the word of the year, which is context, and word of 2026. So context is often the biggest thing that is missing from everything that is asked of that prompt. People are starting to get a bit of the role. They're starting to ask, I want you to be this and I want you to do that, which we'll explore. But basically, context is often the critical piece, and there's just not enough of it. So that's often a critical thing that is missing, and it definitely diminishes and drops down the response rates and things like that.
It reminds me of a bit of the conversation that we had last week about the explicit and the implicit, and the context of your any given situation, that to somebody who has been in a certain situation, like a work environment or a personal environment that has been the same for a very long time, sometimes it's really hard to verbalize, right? Some of those things, and take the stuff that you've just been doing mechanically for most of your career in some cases, and turning that into instructions for some of the agent to act on.
Why, James? So why is being able to articulate what you do suddenly a valuable skill? Like, this is the secret sauce behind it, what you're talking about. So talk us through that. Why? And what's the fundamentals behind it?
That's one of the new capabilities that will increasingly be required to develop, is our ability to make the implicit explicit, because these are language models. They're not nonverbal communication models yet, and this harks back to first year psychology stuff that I learned 20 years ago, where it's 70% of all communication is nonverbal. It's gestures, it's tone of voice and pitch of the of your voice and the pace at which that you're using your voice and the words that are coming out of your mouth. They all express different things in different situations as well. And so these are the kinds of things that get left behind when you're in a conversation with an AI. It's like, you know how every email tends to sound passive aggressive if you read it in a certain way, and it depends on what mood you're in on the day as to how you're going to take it. Imagine being an AI. That's the only the only kind of communication they get. Everything could be passive aggressive. Nothing can be passive aggressive. So like parsing out the 30% of communication that the human has intended in that interaction is not easy for a system like this. I suppose the what we can do to change that is start to get more used to explaining how and why and what we're doing. And that's not something that will come naturally to everybody, but we will be increasingly required to do. And there are other kind of hacks that you can use to develop that with AI, like you can get into conversation with AI, etc. I suppose, and I'm preempting some of the discussion a little bit, but yeah, that's one of the bigger skills that will be required to develop to work with AI effectively.
So I suppose the summary is, James, if the output is average and, the brief was going to be average, we're going to have to reframe. And this is what a lot of training is doing at the moment. It feels like a bit sort of like training 101, but, you've got to do this at the start because, there's definitely, we don't want people to be left behind. We don't want organizations, especially leadership, where their staff, there's a word called shadow AI that I'm sort of seeing that basically, the staff and the team are using it. They're knowing how to use prompt engineering. They're using Prompt Cowboy or something like that. And the leadership aren't. And there's this sort of, maybe two-speed lane that is two speeds that is going on within organizations. So this is quite important, isn't it, in terms of productivity uplift, in terms of sustainability of an organization in the future. You think about 2 years' time. If you don't know how to prompt engineer, then really where will you be at? And it's quite a fascinating and important way to start this episode 26, isn't it? So I think that leads us to our next segment, which is really the meat and the potatoes of this actual pod. And let's really dive into some practicalities now. We had last week the 5 triggers, and I think you agreed. And on reflection, I think that you were quite right about the sentence being so important in that one last week. And there was the pillars that we had. So we've got 4 core pillars today, and as I call them, the 4 pillars of the perfect prompt. And you can basically build these yourself. You can actually use these today and actually come up with your own prompt engineering framework and print it off and stick it on the wall if you like and do whatever you like. You don't have to go with what James and I are talking about. But James, do you want to give us a quick overview of what this next segment is about?
Yeah, for sure. And when I'm giving you each of these 4 components, try and think about every component as being one of the biggest levers that you can pull to change what that mountainous landscape looks like within the model itself. So hopefully that helps. That doesn't confuse you. But first bit is the role. So what we want to do is tell the AI who we need them to be for us in that moment. AIs are not like people. They don't have a personality. Science tells us they have multiple personalities, actually, but that's another podcast. For the purposes of this discussion, we need to tell AI who we need it to be so that it can be primed on what areas of the model need to be accessed. And so the weights of the model can be primed to correlate with that information. So if you tell it to be a financial analyst, it's going to prime the entire model as it exists in a computer like that one behind me here, to bias itself towards giving more detailed answers and higher quality answers from a financial analysis perspective. Got to get the words right. You're an editor of a broadsheet newspaper. If you're writing you might be writing a press release or something like that, you want somebody to look at that and go, I see myself in that work product. If you're in PR, you want that press release to be picked up and printed verbatim in across all channels. So it loads it up with the right expertise and the right tone before you even start the work. Next is context. So context is the context for the job that you want to be doing. So give it what it needs to know about your world. Like, what's your business? What's the audience for this work that we're doing? What are the constraints or risks of things that you're anticipating might happen? What's the backdrop to this situation? And it reminds me of something that Ben said the other day. Set the stage for your AI. That was a really great insight. And is a great illustration. It allows us to feel a little bit more creative in that moment. We are a theater director for this role that's being played by the AI, and we have to set up the backdrop and the scrim and the curtains and the props and the other characters around it and things like that. Otherwise, it's just a blank stage with nothing on it. And that's not, sometimes that's entertaining, but, it adds more color, adds more context. So if you don't do all of that, you can be prepared to get a pretty bland answer. So all of those different variables increase the quality of the answer that you're getting.
I love it, James, and we might pause there. So there's the first two, and I've just thought you just described it as a role in the context are sort of the scaffold, aren't they? And the orchestrator, we sometimes call it in our world, but you've basically built the fundamentals, you've built the foundations of a truly great prompt, and they're the two really important ones to get right first. Often I talk about the role, being so important that if you don't tell it what it needs to be, it doesn't actually know where to go and do it, and treat the role as you've got a personal assistant right next to you. It's 9 a.m. on Tuesday or Monday morning. They've just started working for you. And if they haven't got a role definition of what they're actually meant to be doing in the organization, you go, hey, I'll be back in 2 hours with no sort of direction about what they're meant to do. They're going to sit there looking through the code of conduct for 2 hours, head down, and not actually knowing what they're doing. One hot tip when you put in your role to your prompt, when you're building AI, is to make sure you actually do it as a world-class setting. So what I like to do is say, you're a senior financial analyst working for Goldman Sachs in New York as an investment banker. You're the world's best, banker at private equity or whatever you might be. And I want you to go away and do these tasks for me at the very highest levels. And so what you're actually doing in that role is saying to it, behave at the levels of your role. And when you tie this into Opus 4.8 or Fable or Sol or something like that, it's actually going to, supercharge it even more. You're actually going to get a huge amount more out of it from the available resources from the AI models that we're talking about. So really important. Yeah. And context, James, really quickly, apart from the business and the audience and the constraints and the things like that, what do you think is the most important part of the context to give? Because you can go on a bit, like you can write a pretty big context that doesn't make a lot of sense. And how does, like even a tool like Prompt Cowboy, how does it actually make better quality context in the window of context?
Less is more, generally.
Less is more.
And when I say that, I don't mean just give it a low volume of stuff and you'll get a better result. I mean, if you're able to, it's like when you were at uni or you're in school, and the advice was always write more than you need to write and then pare it back, and you'll get higher quality and fewer words, and that will generally get you better marks anyway, because it'll force you to think critically about your own work. Same goes here, right? You're giving an assignment to the AI, and if you don't give it the key things that it needs to think about, it's all well and good to give it loads and loads of stuff, but it might misfire. It might over-index on particular concepts in the context just because of the biases that live in the model. So what I would recommend is that you do a bit of content. This is context engineering, like at the very basic level. Don't just give it more, thinking more is more. Pare it back to the things that are actually critical. Use your own critical thinking. And there's another kind of AI era capability that we have to develop beyond effective communication and explicit communication, but also critical thinking, and only giving these limited systems the information they need to do the best possible job in that situation. So that'd be a top tip from me.
Awesome. So I think it leads us to the third one, and we can swap in and swap out 3 and 4, but we've got here number 3, task. So often I talk about RCTF, and we'll come to the F in a sec because the output is, of course, the format. But the task is the cousin, I call it, to context. if you get your context right, like James just described, and then you can get the task that's effectively joined to the context, you're actually starting to really think about supercharging your prompt. And the task is often the actual job that you want them to do. And this is the bit that, again, I come back to that personal assistant or intern. They've just started. You give them some context about the job that you want them to do, because they're going to be a world-class Goldman Sachs financial analyst for private equity. But now the task is super important, because you're basically saying, this is what good looks like. This is what it looks like when it's done well. This is actually what I want you to go away and do. And it's a clear definition of a good outcome that lets the model take firm aim at what you are wanting to do and what it wants to give back to you. So you're going to get a lot more out of it, aren't you, James, if you can do this. This ties into last episode with the sentence test, doesn't it? It really ties directly into when you're doing that automation, say it cleanly, it's going to work for you.
Yeah. Well, what's the job to be done here? And that can be short, that can be longer, like if it's a multi-step process. But again, just be mindful of the inherent limitations of what you're using. The more you try to pack into a single prompt or a single step, the more likely you are to get a misfire or a bland result. There is a balance point to all of this. And that comes back again to the fourth point in our list, which is the format. Because how many times have you rocked up to AI and said, write me a document on this, and then it starts to go, it goes like invokes a tool, it goes away and starts to write a docx or a PowerPoint or whatever, and you can't see what's going on. And you're like, all I wanted was like you to give me kind of an overview or like the headings or like an initial direction that we might go in. And so, in part, that's the specificity of the task, but it's also specificity of format. If you want it in a particular format, you have to tell it. If it's a docx or if it's, and I'm partial to markdown files, I have in my instructions, like my Claude pre-prompt instructions, I'm like, I never want docx, I never want PowerPoint, just give me Markdown unless I explicitly ask for it. And that's because that's the format that I prefer, because I can use it in other systems, but that's another story. The takeaway here is, if you want something in a PDF, if you want something in Markdown, if you want something in a CSV, if you want something in an Excel document, tell it. And going even a step further, give it an example of what the output looks like. Give it the template that you're using, or give it the spec sheet that you're working towards. Like you might have a document that is a briefing for what you're doing. Input that and say, hey, look, here, get the format required from this document, and it can then do the kind of hard yards of finding out what that might be. Again, you're introducing risk in that situation, but with models like Opus and now Sol and so on, they're pretty good at handling those kinds of requests.
Yeah, it does. And naming the format actually and telling it, what it should output for you, and kind of knowing what different GPTs can actually generate well for you and what they actually produce the best, saves the back and forth. It saves, getting something usable for you the first time, every time. And I think that's the critical piece that, for example, if you say to one of the GPTs, I want you to produce a PowerPoint, and it doesn't actually produce PowerPoint very well. For example, we know that Claude is not spectacular on images, and it sort of puts its hands up and says, or Anthropic do, and say, we're not very good at images, but we're amazing at Markdown, docs, even Excel spreadsheets.
SVGs, mermaid diagrams.
Yeah. Correct. We're great at PowerPoint. If you try PowerPoint on Opus and some of the outputs that you've seen compared to old ChatGPT, Claude's light years ahead. So if you know what the output's going to be in the certain GPTs and where its strengths lie, and you do all that sort of homework around, the format that you're after, to what James just said, I think the other secret sauce to get it right is about saying explicitly, I want you to generate 5 bullet points for this particular ad campaign and 5 Instagram ads that are in my brand colors that are doing this. And so you're actually explicitly kind of instructing, again, I come back to it, the personal assistant, the staff member, the intern, what do you want to call them? If you go to them on that first day, you're going to be getting to sort of 4 o'clock and they're doing the actual output for you, the format. And if you don't sort of say, I want 5 versions of that Instagram ad and I want 4 bullet points on each one, and I want this in our colors, then if you don't tell them that, they're going to come back with what they think good looks like.
Yeah, I literally created on the weekend because I was doing just some mental processing of some work stuff, and I was like, oh, I just need a bunch of ideas just to go and have a look at and be the editor of, And it took me back to like design thinking, which is diverge, converge, have tons of ideas and don't judge any of them. Just keep writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. Have as many as you can possibly have, and then start to pick and prioritize and rank and see which ones are the most valuable. And so I created a skill for that specifically, so that whenever I'm doing that kind of divergent ideation, either on a problem or on a solution, I can then just go to that skill and go, hey, we need to go divergent here. Let's go. And you get the big list of ideas that you can then start to collaborate on pairing back, which might be a bit of a nice jumping off point into the next section, Llew, which is prompt engineering inside AI agents, which is somewhat what I just outlined. And, it's one thing to write a good brief once, but how does it kind of change when we go from a prompt to designing the whole context environment of an agent and giving it the lay of the land and connecting it to other to tell me, give me a potted version of your view on this.
So, look, James, it's really important because a lot of organizations now, they do the training, they do everything we just talked about, and they're using co-workers, which is sort of an agent harness to do scheduled tasks and things like that. And at its very basic form, it is something, kind of agentic and like an agent, but it's more sort of your own personal GPT, that you're actually calling up. So we explain all of that to everybody. And then there's always excitement to head towards automation and then potentially actual agentic AI. So with a chatbot, the prompt is what you type. And of course, with a custom agent, the prompt is just one part of a much bigger context environment that you design. So the environment that you design is much more considered. It's definitely not just generic, and it's fairly generic back at the sort of the license you have on your CPU, not your GPU, but your computer. You've actually got to do a lot more prompt engineering initially to actually get it to a level that the engineering environment as a whole that you're basically putting this into, the infrastructure, is actually not just a message. It's not just a basic prompt. It's actually, understanding what you're doing. Now, great example here. If you've ever tried to build a Copilot Studio agent, effectively what Microsoft did with Copilot Studio is just take a sort of an agentic one-dimensional build that you can do in Copilot or similar in, Claude Cowork and things like that. And they sort of tried to make a sort of an advanced version in this thing called Copilot Studio. It just is not like Claude Code. It's not like Claude Agents. It's not like any of the other agent harnesses that you can and agentic worlds that you can build in that I'm sure you're going to talk about, James. So I think the critical thing here is understanding where the limitations are, the software that's off the shelf versus actually, bringing in some real, constructs around hooking up all the memory and the tools and bringing those in. And the latest one, which we might talk about in a sec, is about skills, not just Q&A. It's a skill-based agentic framework. So I might pause there because, James, last segment we talked about writing good briefs. How does everything change when we move from prompting in the sort of the GPT space to designing the whole context environment of an agent?
Yeah, we have to think about using our context. What's it called? Context window? Is that
window.
what I'm...
Yeah, window.
I just said a complete
context window.
We've got to use our...
I was about to go, window. And I looked through the window,
We've got to use our context window really wisely because it's not unlimited. And the more of it we use, the less effective AI like the LLMs become at making good decisions. And that's called the needle in a haystack problem. And they test LLMs on needle in a haystack in the development process. It's like, okay, tell me in the chapter about this, what did this character do to that person and why? And like it'll have to bring back or like what was the 35th word on the 10th page, like those kinds of needle in a haystack problems. And they don't get it right all the time, is the moral of this story. The upshot of writing a one good brief is that you get a good output that one time. And you can craft it to the situation that you're in and the context you're in, the particular job that you're doing. But like I was saying last week, I think it's one thing to do that once. It's another thing to build that as a system. And if we're thinking like business people, it's usually and about scalability and good governance and reliability and quality processes and things like that. It's getting into that mindset of let's not reinvent the wheel every time. Let's build a system that provides reliable outputs constantly so that we don't have to be doing all of that mental work every time we go and solve that particular problem. Not all problems fall into that bucket, but when they do, that might be a good situation to set up an agent for a particular job. And the agent itself can be as simple as a prepackaged prompt. And that's the way that that's been handled, like custom GPTs, Copilot agents, projects in Claude. These are all a form of agent that we can customize. So we're customizing the context, we're customizing a pre-prompt, and that's the instructions that you give an agent that are just a part of interacting with it. And if you actually look behind the scenes in some of these, well, in all of these systems, you'll see that when you chat with Claude, I've got Claude in front of me, that's why I keep referring to Claude. If you chat with Claude and you have a look at the logs on the server, it's every time you chat with it, it's not just sending off your prompt to the server. It's sending off your prompt and the instructions that are associated with the project, if there is one, and the system prompt that's baked into the system, and any other tools and context and stuff that the desktop client has that's baked in that it's sending off. It definitely sends off the time, your location, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's easy to assume that it's just that one bit of information and we're getting a certain bit of information back. But we are in a time where almost every interaction with our AI systems is something that we could call agentic. Because there's 9 times out of 10, there are tools there, there is a model there is a prompt there, and there is context there. And those are the kind of 4 big pillars of what we would call an agentic system. And it's really, really hard to get away from. But if you can architect that once and use it repeatedly, you're getting compounding value at the end of the day, right? Like
you are, and it's all about, I suppose, that context is the framing into what is actually the agent brain. And I think the core components of the agent brain, I always talk about AI brains at every single consulting session that I do and every training session. And this matters because the AI agent is pretty much, James, only useful in, as the context that it can access and what it can actually see and the rules that guide the decisions that it makes, right? So, in the agent brain, there's a couple of core components. There's the short-term memory, the long-term memory, the instruction set, which we've started to talk about skills and instructions and, encoded business rules and things like that. And then there's the RAG, and RAG is in, many different formats, and there's retrieval augmented generation. So RAG, old school RAG is becoming, not redundant, but it's not becoming
it's falling out of fashion. Yeah. I think we've gotten a lot of value out of it, but there are other ways to solve similar problems now, aren't there?
100%. So data lake houses are coming and, sources of truth that are different, that are trusted business information that is now going into, from structured data and unstructured data is actually going into a source of truth. The snowflakes and the data bricks and all of those, the mother ducks or whatever they are and all that sort of thing. So basically together though, these components determine whether you're going to be successful and have a generic chatbot or a useful business agent that actually starts to think and call up information that is useful to your business and you're going to create opportunities for your business. And I think, I think in summary of that, the key components are short-term memory gives it the focus, long-term memory gives it the continuity and knows what to do next. The instructions give it the control and the frame and the edge cases and the guardrails and the sort of as I said, the encoded business rules, which is super important. And then the RAG and the data and the source of truth, let's call it that, the body of knowledge, the BOK, actually give it that true business context and, the policies and the customer records and the project documents and the, all the other important information. So, yeah, I think really good to get James's frame and then sort of you're building AI brains within that. And of course, how then prompting affects that, James. With all of that frame, talk us through writing a good brief once with the whole sentence thing and then sort of saying, I'll ask it in a different way. Can you write it once or do you need to keep refining it and optimizing it and changing it, once you go into testing and then full production? it's an ongoing process. You just don't write one prompt using RCTF and throw it in, against all those different elements, and she'll be right, is it? You actually need to keep optimizing.
Yeah, and some of the newer agent harnesses, like Hermes, for example, one of the features that they have is that the agent harness prompts itself, like the system initializes itself, and it says, okay, based on all the interactions that I've had this week, how can I tweak my skills and tweak my memory and tweak this and that and the other to provide a better experience next week? And it does, like, it's designed to do that without being prompted. And you can turn that on and you can turn that off, but that is a continuous improvement process. And all of a sudden, we're back at quality management systems. It's like, I hate to be that boring, we've solved all these problems before guy, but like, it's just continuous improvement. It's looking back and going, okay, what went well, what didn't go so well, what actions can we take to improve and change it for next time? And that goes for your skills as well. And it harks back again to some other tech industry stuff, like things that we would just go around saying, like, change is the only constant. Like, if you're not continuously improving, you're actually falling behind, and you might only just be keeping up. And the same thing goes with AI systems, especially if you're using kind of the off-the-shelf systems like Copilot and Claude, etc. The product is changing all the time. The models are changing all the time. So if you're not tweaking your skills to get the most out of them, if you've noticed a behavior change and you're not getting what you need out of that skill or that agent anymore, you might have to go back and do some maintenance, I suppose, is the best way of putting it.
Yeah. So I suppose, James, in terms of what we're talking about here, is it a question for you? Is it a specialist sport? Is it a, you've got to actually understand and know how to do this, or can anybody pick up Terminal with their $30 a month license of Claude Code and actually go and take some of this on board and try and spin some of this up themselves? Can they use Claude Code to do it? Like, can they set up the auth, and can they set up their systems? Can they do a bit of RAG / data, ingestion? What is this approachable? What this segment is about?
I encourage everybody to have a go with those kinds of agent harnesses. And an agent harness, like the Claude desktop client is an agent harness. The Claude Code is an agent harness. Cursor is an agent harness. Like, the only difference is what job you're trying to do with that thing and how it organizes and engineers context for you to get a more consistent, high quality result out of the model that's sitting behind the scenes. And so I would say try anything once, like give it a go, see if you like it. Like, I never knew I would love the terminal so much until I got in there and I started mucking around and breaking things. And you might be the same, but I would suggest do something that you are looking forward to doing, where you can take a few knocks and you can take a few setbacks, and like you might have a little goal in mind, or you might have either a learning goal or a work objective or something, like, I have to do this and this would be a great way to solve that problem. So if you're building a website or you'd want to build a system for the first time or what have you, 100% dive into Claude Code, give it a go, see if you like it. But if you're just trying to author documents, do a lot of document authoring, Cowork might be better because you store it locally on your machine. It gets the context of the folder that you're in, and that is probably going to serve you better for that job. So it's horses for courses. And I realize that that's a bit of a it depends style answer, but it is the best advice that one can give. Experiment, try it out, see if it's right for your particular job. And if it's not, pivot to something else and see if that's the right one.
Yeah, great tips. And I think it beautifully rolls into next week and sets everything up about what we're going to talk about next week, which we're going to reveal in a second. But before we do, James, in summary, your key takeaway from today's prompt engineering and agentic prompt inside agents segment, episode 25. What are your thoughts?
I struggle often to make the implicit explicit on this podcast. Because when we talk about what's a prompt versus what's context and what's an agent harness versus what's a desktop client for a model, and it's like trying to slice something in a direction that it doesn't want to be cut in. It's hard to get your head around the fact that these are nested concepts. And I think we were talking a few weeks ago about the fact that, an automated system can have an autonomous component and an autonomous system can have an automated component. These are not mutually exclusive kinds of ideas. So if all of this word salad has been confusing for you, I sympathize. I don't just empathize, I sympathize with you. Because as an industry and as people who work in AI, we're trying to pull down some pretty challenging, woolly concepts and trying to make sense of them. And sometimes we have to present things in a way that are concrete and categorical when they just aren't. So if you do have any if you do want us to dive into those concepts, as always, hit us up with a comment. If there's any, if there are words that you don't understand or things feel like their concepts are fighting each other, let us know, because we will probably agree with you, and that's a good excuse for us to have another episode, Luke.
It is, and lettuce is actually part of the word salad. Fun, bit of a dad joke there.
Tish.
But I think, James, 100% agree with you. It's not easy, and that's why this pod is anti-hype, right? We're just trying to deconstruct it and help everybody out. My takeaway for literally the whole pod was around what it makes an agent brain. And now we can talk about RCTF, role, context, task, format, really important stuff. But I think everybody needs to shift into, do RCTF really well, but go straight into what is your organization looking like from building an agent brain, an AI agent brain. And you need the short-term memory, you need the long-term memory, you need your instruction set, and you need some form of body of knowledge or RAG or Lakehouse or something that actually is your source of truth. So trusted documents and trusted business information. Mm-hmm. If you get those four things right, I think you're going to experience prompt engineering at a different level, because you can actually then start to prompt using RCTF your agent brain and actually start to get a huge amount out of it. Mm. And I think that's a big takeaway for me, is that's now accessible to everybody out there. So super exciting, super exciting.
And if you're struggling with prompting, don't be afraid to ask the AI to help you as well. Yeah. It won't judge you, I promise. And if it does, maybe just log a bug report or something like that. But change maybe I'll give us a bit of a hint for next week on what we might cover. So next week we're going to point to everything we just learned and in the direction of the most powerful model that we've already been talking about a fair amount on this podcast, and a lot of people are barely using for various reasons, and we'll go into that as well. It's Fable. Fable class models are here, or Mythos class models are here. So people either love it and are quietly unsure what to do with it, and honestly, most are using it at about 2% of what it can do. So next week we go deep on how to actually get the most out of it, because it's very powerful, but with great power comes great responsibility. And if today was about skills and prompting, next week is where you can aim it to get the maximum out of models, just like Fable. So don't miss it.
Yep, absolutely. And thanks again to our sponsor, promptcowboy.ai. If today's session made you think about how to actually get your team using AI properly, go check out their agentic features within promptcowboy.ai. They're the practical starting point that a lot of organizations are missing. So trot on over to promptcowboy.ai.
Thank you for joining Zero Shot. That's it for today's session. And thank you not just for listening, but for staying with us all the way through. It means a lot to us, and it's what keeps the show going.
Yeah, absolutely, James. And we built Zero Shot on something simple, the right information delivered straight to you at the right time. And we want to help change an entire business generation of leaders and how we all navigate this revolution. So this is why James and I show up every week. We're for the builders, the skeptics, the strategists, and everybody in between who are trying to make sense of this crazy space and are actually moving the needle in their industry. So we're here for you. and this is why we're doing it.
Yeah, and here's something that we genuinely mean. If you're, and I've said it twice, I think, already in this podcast, if you're confused about something, if there's a topic you can't find a straight answer on, you heard something today and you're like, what the heck, just let us know, leave comments, send us a message, drop it wherever you found us, in YouTube or TikTok or whatever, and we will build an episode around it. That you're part of making the show better, so please do that.
Yeah, awesome. And if today was useful, and we hope it was, the best thing you can do right now is go and follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you're listening. It doesn't cost you anything. It will keep this mission alive and in front of more people who need it. Find our LinkedIn page, search zeroshot.com.au. Follow James Gauci and Llew Jury and Yenny Larotta while you're there as well. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. A couple of views coming through on TikTok. I think that there's one that's really good about, Claude again and things like that. So there's these great videos coming and starting to get some traction. So, we've got the short form content. Even in a busy week, you can watch the key moments. So this is, how we grow, and our job is to help people. So thanks.
Thanks, Llew. And finally, a shout out to Yenny Larotta. Lenia Larotta? I don't think that's the right way. I just
Yenny Larotta.
I just spoonerized your name. I'm sorry about that, Yenny.
We're not going to do this again, by the way. We're going to leave this in here.
This is going to be in the podcast forever.
Be in the podcast
it's going to be canonical.
No, we're not going to.
Yenny, thank you so much for everything you do. You keep us moving, and we couldn't do any of this without you. While you're on LinkedIn, go and give Yenny a virtual high five. Thanks for staying here for the episode. Stay sharp, stay sovereign, and we'll see you next time. See you later.
Cheers.